As Keanu Reeves steps onto the stage of the Steve Harvey Show, the atmosphere is lighthearted. The audience anticipates an engaging conversation filled with humor, Hollywood anecdotes, and Steve's signature warmth. But as Keanu settles into his seat and his eyes catch sight of the crucifix hanging around Steve's neck, an invisible shift takes place. The air thickens with something deeper, something unspoken yet palpable. What begins as a routine celebrity interview is about to take an unexpected turn. In the next few moments, it won't be Steve guiding the conversation. He'll be struggling to hold back tears. Keanu is about to share something that will leave everyone changed. The studio lights dim slightly as the crowd quiets in anticipation. The familiar theme music fades as Steve walks across the stage with his well-known half grin, cue cards in hand, eyes radiating warmth. But tonight feels different. Right from the beginning, Steve senses it. This isn't just another television segment. Something meaningful is about to unfold. With genuine admiration, Steve introduces Keanu not just as a Hollywood star, but as something rarer. A man whose presence resonates deeply with people, even those who have never met him. They call him the kindest man in Hollywood, Steve announces, greeted by applause. The internet says he's the last good guy left. Me? I think he's the purest example of grace I've ever seen. Keanu walks onto the stage, dressed in his signature understated style. Dark jeans, a black shirt, a simple blazer. No extravagance, just authenticity. He offers a small wave, a modest smile, and a slight nod, visibly uneasy with the overwhelming attention. As he takes his seat, the energy in the room shifts again. The moment transforms from performance to raw honesty. He speaks softly, almost as if not wanting to disturb the stillness. He thanks the audience, chuckles nervously, and admits that this kind of reception always catches him off guard. "I'm just a guy trying to do my best," he says. Steve leans in, grinning. "And that's exactly what makes you special." Their conversation veers away from typical Hollywood chatter. They discuss kindness, vulnerability, and navigating life without emotional armor, even when life gives every reason to wear it. Steve brings up Keanu's well-documented acts of generosity, giving up his subway seat, helping crew members on set, donating portions of his salary to support behind-the-scenes workers. Keanu nods but shrugs off the praise. "To me," he says sincerely, "it's just the right thing to do." His voice carries a quiet wisdom, never dramatic, never self-congratulatory. The audience clings to his every word. "Everyone's going through something," he adds. "Sometimes the smallest gesture can change someone's entire day." Steve, visibly moved, absorbs Keanu's words. Here was a man who had every reason to withdraw behind his success and status, yet he remained open, present, and deeply human. Their discussion shifts to the paradox of fame, how someone who has experienced so much success can stay so grounded. "I guess I've always felt that none of this is promised," Keanu reflects. "I've lost a lot, and when you lose people you love, when life shakes you to your core, you realize that none of this, none of it, makes you better than anyone else." He pauses, his gaze drifting slightly off camera, lost in memory. "I grew up moving around a lot," he continues. "Born in Lebanon, raised in Canada. My father left when I was young. My sister fought leukemia. I lost my partner. I lost a child. And yet, I'm here." He takes a deep breath. "Every day is a choice. You either let pain harden you or you let it shape you into someone softer." The words settle heavily over the audience. The silence in the room is profound, people holding their breath, reflecting on their own struggles. Steve instinctively reaches for the small crucifix on his chest, fingers resting on it in quiet contemplation. "You talk about silence like it's familiar," Steve says finally. Keanu nods. "It is. Silence has been my companion for a long time," he admits. "But in that silence, sometimes, I hear the clearest things." Steve's voice softens. "Have you ever heard God in that silence?" For the first time in the interview, Keanu hesitates, his gaze locking onto Steve's. Then, after a thoughtful pause, he answers, "Yes, I believe in something greater. I've doubted it, walked away from it, felt alone. But even in the darkest moments, I could sense something, a presence, a peace. Not always loud, not always comforting, but always there." Steve's fingers tighten around the cross. "That's faith," he says quietly, "even if it doesn't have a name, even if it's just something you feel." Keanu looks at the crucifix, his expression shifting. He leans forward slightly, almost as if stepping onto uncertain ground. "Steve," he says in a low, weighted voice, "can I tell you something I've never said out loud before?" Steve doesn't speak, just nods. Keanu exhales, bracing himself. "There was a night, a few years ago, when I was in a very dark place. I couldn't move, couldn't eat, couldn't sleep. I wasn't even sure I wanted to be alive." The audience is motionless. "I was scrolling through my phone, just trying to feel something. And I came across a video. It was you, talking about purpose, about faith, about how God doesn't waste pain." Steve's expression freezes. Keanu continues, his voice softer. "But it wasn't just what you said. It was how you said it, like you had lived it. And you were wearing this crucifix, this exact one." Steve looks down at the cross he's holding, his grip tightening. "I watched that clip 3 times, Keanu whispers. "And the next morning, for the first time in weeks, I got out of bed." He leans back as if the memory itself carries weight. "I've never told anyone that," he confesses. "But I've carried your words with me ever since." Steve struggles for words. When he finally speaks, his voice is unsteady. "I was just speaking from the heart," he says. "I had no idea." Keanu interrupts gently. "That's just it. You didn't have to know. That's what made it real. You weren't trying to inspire me. You were just being yourself." Steve's eyes glisten with emotion. The studio lights reflect off the tear that slips down his cheek. Keanu's voice is reverent now. "That crucifix you wear, it's not just a symbol. It's a message. You think you're just a comedian with faith? But Steve, I think you're something else." Steve looks at him, perplexed yet open. "I think you're a minister in disguise," Keanu says. Silence fills the room. Not a television pause, but something sacred. The weight of truth lingers in the air. Steve, still clutching the cross, whispers one word. "I'm listening." "I remember the lighting in the video," Keanu began. "It wasn't perfect, grainy, a bit rough around the edges. But what stood out wasn't the quality. It was you, standing on stage, holding a microphone in one hand, your other resting over your chest, right above that cross." Steve nodded, already feeling a wave of emotion. "You were talking about purpose," Keanu continued, "but not in a polished or rehearsed way. It felt like you were struggling through your own story as you shared it. You said pain has its own language, that when someone who has suffered speaks, their words cut through the noise." He paused, locking eyes with Steve. "And then you said something that has stayed with me ever since. God doesn't always call the qualified. He qualifies the called." Steve's lips parted slightly as his hand instinctively reached for the crucifix around his neck, the same one Keanu had described. "You said that God uses ordinary people to do extraordinary things," Keanu added. "That even if you think you're just telling jokes, just making ends meet, just trying to push through another day, God might be using you in that very moment to change someone's life." Steve leaned forward, resting his elbows on his knees. The memory of that old video was coming back to him, the one he had recorded years ago after a show, during one of his lowest points, when he decided to speak from the heart, unscripted. "And that day," Keanu continued, "I realized something. It wasn't just the words you spoke, it was how you said them. You believed them, and that belief lit something in me." He glanced down, his voice softening. I had lost my direction. The grief, the silence. They had buried my compass. But when I heard those words and saw the conviction in your eyes, I realized, even in my darkest moment, I wasn't invisible. He looked back at Steve. You were a stranger to me, but in that moment, you became a beacon. Steve exhaled deeply, a breath that seemed to carry the weight of years. Keanu smiled gently. That's the thing about beacons, he said. They don't always know who's watching. They just keep shining. The pause that followed wasn't awkward. It was full of everything that had been said and everything that hadn't. Then, Steve finally spoke, his voice quieter than before. You know, sometimes I wonder if I've done enough, he admitted. If all this, comedy, hosting, speaking, actually means anything. Keanu leaned in. It does. I'm living proof. Steve shook his head, overwhelmed. I was just trying to survive, man. I wasn't trying to save anyone. And that, Keanu said, is exactly why you did. The audience stirred, small murmurs of emotion breaking the silence. Some wiped their eyes, others sat in reverent stillness. Steve turned toward the crowd for a moment before looking back at Keanu. You said that video changed something in you. What was it? Keanu sat with the question before replying. Hope. That maybe the silence wasn't the end of my story. That maybe, just maybe, God still had a purpose for me. He held Steve's gaze. Seeing that crucifix on your chest while you spoke about divine purpose, it wasn't just coincidence. It was confirmation. A quiet reminder that even through a screen, light finds a way in. Steve nodded slowly, visibly moved. You reminded me, Keanu continued, that I wasn't forgotten, that my story wasn't over. He let the moment breathe before adding, and I remember exactly what you said, Steve. Word for word. I've carried it with me for years. And tonight, I need to say it back to you, because maybe you've forgotten just how powerful it really is. Steve looked at him, a question forming in his eyes. Keanu took a deep breath, his eyes steady. Sometimes, you're not the one being rescued. You're the one doing the rescuing, and you don't even know it. Steve's lips trembled slightly. You think you're just talking, Keanu continued, but you're actually testifying. Steve covered his face with his hands for a moment. When he looked up, his eyes were glistening. You remembered all that? I had to, Keanu said simply, because I wasn't just hearing you. I was being lifted by you. Steve sat back, his hands clasped together as if trying to steady himself. The air in the room felt different. This wasn't just a stage. This wasn't just a show. This was healing. Keanu's voice softened. And maybe you don't hear this enough, but Steve, you matter. Not for what you do, but for who you are. You carried faith into places where people had none left, including me. Steve took slow, emotional breaths. The moment held in silence until Keanu spoke again, almost in a whisper. And now I have something to tell you. Something that might change your life, just like you changed mine. Steve looked up, the entire room holding its breath. He said nothing, just absorbed everything Keanu had shared, the gratitude, the testimony, the truth. Then Keanu leaned forward, no longer speaking from memory, but from something sacred. I remember every word of that message, he said, and I want to say them back to you now, not as a reminder, but as a mirror. Steve's eyes locked onto his, unmoving. And then, with quiet reverence, Keanu spoke. God doesn't always use the mighty or the perfect. Sometimes, he picks the broken, the ones no one expects, because they know how to reach people the strong can't. Steve blinked slowly, the words washing over him. You don't need a pulpit to preach. You don't need a robe to be called. You don't need a church to carry the word. Keanu's voice didn't waver. He wasn't quoting a speech. He was delivering a truth. Sometimes your pain is your ministry, and sometimes your comedy is just the disguise God uses to bring hope. Steve's lips parted, but no words came out. He was completely undone. Keanu looked at him gently. "You thought you were just making people laugh," he said. "But you were doing more than that. You were reaching hearts. You were saving lives. You were carrying light." He let those words settle before adding the one line that shattered Steve's composure. "You're a minister, Steve. You just happen to wear a suit instead of a collar." Steve dropped his head, one hand covering his face, the other gripping the cross on his chest. Tears flowed freely. No shame, no restraint. The audience didn't clap, didn't move. Just silence. Sacred, still, holy silence. And then Keanu whispered, "The way you carry that crucifix, it's not just a symbol, it's a signal. And tonight, I think it's pointing at something bigger than both of us." Steve looked up, tears still falling. Keanu took a deep breath as if steadying himself. "Because tonight, I have something to tell you. Something that may change your life." Steve's expression shifted. Part fear, part awe. Keanu leaned in, his voice quiet but certain. "Like you changed mine.